As I've alluded to in other videos, inheritance is not just what you inherit from your parents and your genetics. That genetic lineage has been shaped by 4.5 billion years of evolution. Trillions upon trillions of generations that have successfully reproduced and passed on their specific biological information have led to a very unique set of traits that help you survive and reproduce. And every species on this planet is a byproduct of that evolutionary history. And understanding those species is often a function of understanding the specific traits that they have evolved to aid in their survival and reproduction. Those traits are what we call adaptations. Adaptations are evolutionarily selected for traits that aid in survival or reproduction. Right? Evolution is the change in the frequency of genotype and therefore phenotype over time. There are two processes within evolution that help us select for specific adaptations. Right? Those adaptations that help us survive, or those adaptations that help us reproduce. So let's talk a little bit about adaptations that help us survive. Survival adaptations can start at a very simple level. We see a very clear example of coloration. Right? In snowy climates, the white-colored rabbit is going to be a lot harder for predators to spot than the brown-colored rabbit. Predators searching for a meal are going to zero in on that brown-colored rabbit, meaning in the future there are going to be less brown-colored rabbits to reproduce. The white-colored rabbits are going to be more likely to survive and have more children, meaning that over time, the color of rabbits is going to become more and more white and less brown. In nature, we see a wide variety of adaptations that help us camouflage, help us forage for food, help us survive in specific climates, whether it's the long neck of the giraffe allowing them to forage in an area where there's little competition, whether it's the humps on the camel that allow them to concentrate their fat in a small zone, allowing them to radiate heat better in the desert. These are specific adaptations that are centered around survival. Adaptations that are centered specifically around survival go through a process of what we call natural selection. Natural selection differentiates specific phenotypes that aid in our survival. When we talk about natural selection and evolution, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that evolution can take a considerable amount of time. When we're talking about adaptations for humans, we're not talking about specific traits that allow us to survive in the complex and bustling urban centers where the majority of human beings live. Evolution takes many generations to have a substantial change or effect. So when we're talking about adaptation in humans, we're talking about the past. We're talking about what occurred in the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness. This is the time period in which we are optimally evolved for. It is definitely not cities. In fact, the time period for which humans are mostly evolved for is about 500,000 to a million years ago. We were living in a very different environment. We were living in sub-Saharan African grasslands. This is the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, or EEA, for human beings. That means that our traits, both physically, mentally, and behaviorally, are optimized for this environment and not urban settings. That means that some of the traits that we talk about in terms of evolved behaviors or mental processes might actually be maladaptive or bad for us in the current environment. For example, the primary source of sugar in the EEA was fruit. Fruit was highly valuable in terms of its vitamin, mineral, and nutritional content, and therefore human beings that valued the sugary taste of fruit and went out of their way to seek it out and to eat it actually had a better nutritional profile than human beings that didn't have a sweet tooth. So in the EEA, having a sweet tooth, having sugar being a strong motivator, was actually adaptive. In the modern world, what have we done? Well, we've managed to extract all that sugar and throw away all the good stuff. And then we mix it up with some chocolate and other chemicals and just mainline that stuff directly. Right? When we can get these straight hits of massive amount of sugar and fat and chocolate all rolled into one, our sweet tooths actually get us in a lot of trouble. Turns out that having a desire to seek out and consume sugar, which was highly adaptive in that EEA, is actually killing us in the modern environment. And this is what we mean by traits that have evolved are not necessarily helping us survive in the current environment. They may be maladaptive in the modern environment, even when they were helpful for our survival in the EEA. Right? So for a trait to have evolved, it doesn't have to help us right now. It just had to help us in the EEA.